What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Bridging the Gap. As always, I'm Adrian Malillo, and I'm joined with my great co-host,
Steve Rombolo.
and there's a little bit of a delay on Zoom right now, so sorry about that. But anyway, so Stephen and I have an awesome guest with us today. We're super excited for it. His name is Joe Amditis, and he is, I would say, an inspiration for Stephen and I. He's somebody that taught us a lot of what we know. We spent many hours in a little studio at WMSC with Joe at Montclair State, arguing politics, talking about literally anything, though, under the sun. He's a great guy. He is the assistant director for products and events at the Center for Cooperative Media, which is part of NJ News Commons at Montclair State, which we'll talk a little bit more about. He's the host of the What the F Just Happened Today podcast, which is a super short form podcast where you get all the big headlines of the daily news. And he's just an all around great guy, a veteran and an esteemed journalist. And we're super happy to have Joe on with us. Thanks for joining us, Joe.
That was one of the best intros I think I've ever had. So thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we're super excited to talk with you again, and we miss seeing you across the hall all the time, of course.
Well, you're on to bigger, better things, my friends.
we're trying. But anyway, let's start with this, Joe. Let's start with what was young Joe's path to where he is today. You could start from when you were a little boy. You could start from college, whatever you want to do. But talk a little bit about your path and your history.
Well, it's a little bit disjointed, but in college at Rutgers, after I got back from Iraq, I was really into studying international relations. I wanted to study political transitions and revolutions. I was already working as a research assistant with the poli-sci department, and I was like, law school / grad school. I was like, I got to be studying. I got to be doing something with academic papers, and I was like, academia is for me. And then I went to like my first academic conference and was bored to tears, bored out of my mind. These are some of the most interesting stories and findings and discoveries you could think of, and the most boring presentation and delivery you could possibly imagine. And it sort of like clicked in me that academia was not sufficient to tell the kind of stories and to share the information I was finding in the way that I, had hoped. And so I went from that all the way down to a buddy of mine who I actually went to high school with, who was the editor and chief at the Daily Targum at Rutgers University. Hated that. He did not like the paper's direction, its editorial style. And he called me up one day, said, "You want to start our own paper?" So we did. We started. It was called Muckgers. I did not choose the name. And it was a muckraking organization at Rutgers, hence the portmanteau. And we did that for a couple of years. It was great. We got a grant. We applied for an investigative reporting grant, or a Grow and Strengthen grant, as they were called, from the Center for Cooperative Media. And we got it. It was like $4,000. And all of a sudden we're like, shoot, we have to take this seriously now. Like, really, this is, it's like a thing. And then after getting rejected from pretty much every grad school I applied to that were in my list, I figured, okay, well, this is really, I got to lean into this. So I applied for a job at the Center for Cooperative Media after going through their business coaching training and their entrepreneurial journalism course. And I got a job as the coordinator. And I have clung to the healthcare and student loan forgiveness act since then, pretty much. I'm on 8 years now at the center. I went from coordinator to, we had a change in leadership. One of the associate director from before got cancer and recovered and then retired. And so I moved to associate director to fill that role. And then we brought on our third full-time person recently, Cassandra Etienne. And we split the associate director role into assistant director of products and events, and Cassandra's role as assistant director of membership and programming. And so now that's where I am. I'm one of 3 full-time employees at the center. We just hit 10 years this year. And I'm pretty much the go-to person. My passion, and has been for a while, and is now just supporting local news, helping it grow, helping it suck less, and just helping it really just sort of like build on itself and recover from the years and years of institutional shift and capture that has occurred in media at all levels, and to try to build something new, community-based, engagement-based, listening and participatory, and try to spread that and bring that sense of cooperative media to the local news ecosystem in New Jersey and then elsewhere in the rest of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that local news is super important, and I think it's becoming more and more evident as politics at one time was very local, went very national, and now I'm starting to see a shift personally, and I don't know if you guys agree that it's becoming local again. School board elections are more important than ever. Town halls are filling out. I think that local politics is coming back. The local community is coming back, and I think that that's why local news has to start coming back too. Before we get into the deep of local news and cooperative media, I just wanted to hit on something because you sort of mentioned it in passing, and I know it's a big part of the formation into why you believe the things that you do. You mentioned you went away to Iraq and you had a little bit of time in the service, and you kind of just brushed that off. But if you can just touch a little bit about that time and how that's impacted to where you are now.
Well, to be very blunt, I've spent 7 years in the New Jersey Army National Guard. I spent a year deployed on active duty to Iraq, and to be blunt with you, being in the U.S. military showed me that we are, in most cases overseas, the bad guys, and we are an imperialist occupying force across the world that has been responsible for more terrorism, more terror, more disruption, and destruction than any other regime on the planet, bar none. And to be a part of that and to see that up close really sort of caused me to reevaluate a lot of the things that I thought. I was brought up in a very conservative household in North Carolina for 12 years. And I would have voted for McCain in 2008 if I wasn't too lazy to send in an absentee ballot from overseas. I had a broad political realignment in my, over the years. I started reading everything. The more uncomfortable it made me, the more I dug into it. And that process that was very formative. That experience was very formative because it sort of forced me to question whether or not some of the axiomatic things that I believed were indeed true or based in fact. And the Iraq War and the deception and lies behind that. What better place to start questioning whether or not are we the baddies or not than there. So.
Sure. I think that what's important to note is in what you said there in your route to journalism is I think that the role of the journalist, especially in any democracy, in our democracy, not excluded of this, they have to be that sort of voice, that person that questions what the government is doing in any sense. So you can be on one side of the political aisle or the other, and you could disagree with what Joe said about America being the bad guys in these situations. But the role of the journalist is to say, hold on, are we sure we're doing the right thing here? And I think that is an important thing in your story, is that now you are working in this journalistic field, and you realize that the story isn't one-sided, right? So you have to tell both sides of the story, and I think that that's really important.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important to look at the story from multiple angles, and to question the government. I mean, authority is deserves to be challenged, but when the authority meets that challenge, then that's a possible outcome as well. I think especially when you have an hegemonic power or authority, it deserves extra scrutiny. And I think you can look at both sides of a story, so to speak, but the next step into that is to deciding and determining through rigorous reporting, peer-reviewed, replicable processes, not peer-reviewed in the academic journal sense, but something that is replicable, a principled approach to information and to power, to have those principles on which you base your investigations and your reporting, I think is extremely crucial. And I think I've said this a million times, but I think that when people talk about objective journalism or they want objectivity, what happened to impartial reporting, fair and balanced reporting, I don't think they actually believe that someone can be truly objective in any situation. I think what they mean is they want principled reporting. They want to be able to look at what you're doing and then walk back and work through the steps that you took, that you laid out to describe how and what you did to get to that conclusion. And that process is not just arbitrary, that it's based on a set of morals, of ethics, of guidelines, of principles that guide how you approach these things. And that, I think, is what you hear, or what I'm hearing when I hear most people say they want objectivity or they wanted to look at both sides. It's very obvious that one side may be correct in many situations. but it's about the process of how you arrive at that conclusion that brings the credibility of the determination that you're putting forward, in my view.
Sure. Almost instead of objective journalism, you want ethical journalism. We want to see how you're doing what you're doing and why you're getting to that conclusion. I think that's absolutely fair. But I want to jump over to Steve and let him jump in here.
So one thing I kind of want to explore on that topic and maybe get your opinions on, because agree or disagree, you use some pretty harsh language. You said that, we're kind of an imperialist occupying force, right? And that stuck out to me. Language is very important when it comes to journalism and conveying these messages and, abiding by a certain set of principles. What do you think, at least in your experiences, is the line of how abrasive journalism should be?
Well, I would say that journalism should be as abrasive as is called for. It should be proportional. And the reason I use those terms, to harken back to what I was saying earlier about international relations research and studying the UN Charter and UN resolutions declaring what counts as an occupation, or where I've made those conclusions. And I've written research papers about this topic on everything from Libya to the Iraq War, to the whole Middle East.
We lost you, Joe.
Just called me, so I'll start that over.
Okay, you're good.
About that. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good.
Now I lost you guys. Hang on a second. Son of a bitch.
You're good.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear
Okay,
us?
good. I'm back. Yeah, sorry
All
about
right,
that. So I'll start that over.
Sure.
So I think that when we're talking about the language that we use, I use particular language specifically in the case of what it means to be an occupying force, not just out of nowhere. I think it's important to use the language that the situation calls for, of course. And in this case, I think when it comes to the U.S. occupation of Iraq, there's no question that based on the United Nations definitions, the International Criminal Court's definitions, all of these, the Rome Statute, everything that deals with the definitions around what occupation is points to that word. So in that case, I think that we are an imperial occupying force in a country that didn't attack us. I don't think that's disputable, but I take your point about the language that people use and why it's important. I think you can see that everywhere in the way we choose to refer to groups of people and their status in this country. I think it's important in how you do interpersonal relationships when you refer to people and the way they prefer to be referred to, whether it's their name or their salutation or their pronouns. I think all of these things are important because language not only conveys meaning, but it shapes the way our brain functions and the way our brain grows. The words that you use can either limit or open up the pathways that you can use to understand and interpret the world around you. And so from the, misty psychological, philosophical end all the way down to the literal definitional end of what it constitutes, what word means what thing, I think it's very important. And again, you have to base those determinations and those definitions, or at least those terms, off of a clear process.
So then to jump off of that, because I mean, your reputation and your body of work kind of speaks for itself. It's extensive. You have all this knowledge. As a journalist yourself, how do you kind of meet in the middle? Because the reality of the situation is, especially people our age, aren't going to want to sit down, get an article, and read through why you chose the term imperialist occupational force, right? Just to use the example. So how do you kind of balance that when you're trying to deliver this really important message to a population that might not be ready to receive all that information?
I'm glad you asked. It's a great the answer. The short answer is links. When you use a particularly charged term, the internet is beautiful in that it allows you to give someone who is interested in learning more about why you chose that word the opportunity to explore that, to go on the Wikipedia hole, rabbit hole, or whatever it is. The people who have time and interest to do that, you give them an opportunity to do that. And you also build a reputation for doing that by making it easily accessible and available where anyone might look for those things. Because again, if the person is not interested, or the person just sort of accepts the wording you're using, or agrees with it, they probably won't need to go in there. But when someone does want to challenge or inquire about why you described something a certain way, or what your approach is. How did you come to those conclusions? Why are you covering this story? Why is this newsworthy? All of those can be laid out at the bottom, in line, on the sidebars. It can be, you can do special events. We encourage news organizations to do that kind of community outreach and actually meet with people and have them discuss grievances or questions about their coverage, and then respond to them. And don't just involve them and the community at the end of the process. Don't relegate them to the comment section. Those stories that you're writing and the framing that you're getting is part of a process that's built that involves the community at the beginning. You're not just picking a story or a topic to cover, especially at the local level, to bring things away from the Iraq War real quick. When we're talking about local stories here, there's so many experts and so many brilliant people in every community, in your community, just waiting to be tapped and waiting to be brought into that process early on, so that they are more involved and invested in the journalism production itself. And so that by the time you get to the comments, you have an entire community, or you have a cohort of people who have not only contributed to it, but have been a part of the construction, a process of that story, of those terms, and of that phrasing. And so even if you don't get those people, and in addition to doing that, you can still provide on-the-spot links and explanations and opportunities for people to learn more about what you did and why you did it.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome point, Joe, about you need to get the community involved from the beginning, from the jump on these stories. So I think that's a perfect segue into what the Center for Cooperative Media is, what it does, how you guys accomplish that goal. Because as you said, that is one of the goals of the center. So talk a little bit about the Center for Cooperative Media and exactly the goals and how you guys accomplish them.
Yeah, so the Center for Cooperative Media is a grant-funded initiative of the School of Communication and Media. We get funding from the Dodge Foundation, the Knight Foundation, Democracy Fund, the Abrams Foundation, and Montclair State pays the salary of our director, Stephanie Murray, as their contribution in addition to the office space. And we're externally focused. We do 3 or 4 buckets of things, really. The first one I'll talk about is research. We do, our research director, Dr. Sarah Stonbely, is a world-renowned, to be honest, research professional, and has been doing this work and studying local news and collaborative journalism for the better part of the decade now. And she has put together a body of work that explores everything from what happens when a major newsroom like Gannett shuts down a big regional paper like the Montclair Times, and what happens to the coverage. She's mapped every single news provider in the state, over news and information provider, which I believe the number is over 700. For the 565 municipalities in the state, and we're clearly definitely missing some. She has worked with Oni Advincula, our ethnic and community media coordinator, to put together a survey and an overview of the state of community and ethnic media in the state, media that serves particular ethnicities or national diasporas or religious communities, for instance. And so that is a big part of what we do, and we all are very supportive and stand behind Sarah and her work. We also study collaborative journalism, like I mentioned, and that is basically the practice, or the activity of working two news organizations, or now increasingly news organizations and civil society orgs or non-governmental organizations, working together, often in large groups. You've heard of ICIJ, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, who did the Panama Papers, the Pangolin Reports, and all the Ps that they love to publish. So we study that, we advocate for that. We are organizing conferences around it every year. This is the sixth annual Collaborative Journalism Summit in Chicago, starting on Thursday. I'm about to drive 12 and a half hours to get there. And then the other half of what we do is dedicated to supporting, growing, and strengthening local news in New Jersey and promoting collaboration and cooperation among them, both on the editorial side, working together on various topics like toxic contamination and all the unremediated sites across the state, to immigration issues, to revenue collaborations on the side, where we try to find ways to share an ad person or an ad salesperson to help share revenue and share profits when you are approaching something as a tiny 1 or 2 person operation. It's very hard to get in the room for these larger ad buys. But when you have a cohort of 10, 12, 15, 16 news organizations representing all these different constituencies, it allows you to get more leverage and put yourself on a higher plane when it comes to the perspective of these advertisers. And so all of those things are sort of what the center does. There's a million more things going on at the moment. We also serve as the back office sort of hub at Montclair State for the New Jersey Civic Information Consortium, first in the nation public funding model for local news. And so we work very closely with them. And then we just basically we answer phone calls. People call us and say, hey, I don't know how to fix this thing with my WordPress theme for news. And we connect them with people who are smart and know how to do these kinds of things. So it's a hodgepodge, it's a lot, but those are our four main buckets, I would say.
Yeah, so it's basically the hub for growing local news again, getting it back out there. Because at one point in our country, local news was how you got your news. Everybody got it that way, you know. Obviously, you have your papers of record. Your New York Times is, you know, your big national papers. But at the end of the day, most people got it from these smaller papers that were doing things that mattered in their community. And then I think you saw, as media evolved, you started these broadcasting companies, these major media companies, your CNNs, you know, your Fox Newses. And now I think in the age of the internet, these small media companies are starting to rise again. And I think that's really awesome. And that's a really big thing. And it's important for these things to get off the ground. You have a place where they can connect. And that place is the Center for Cooperative Media. So I think that's a really awesome function of what you guys do and important.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm gonna let Steven jump in here with any comments or questions he has too.
So a question that I kind of would maybe like a personal opinion on, to see where you guys stand on it, because I agree everything that you guys do is unfathomably important. And I want to frame this the correct way. I don't want to make it seem adversarial.
Please, come on.
But how does an institution, right, like the Center of Cooperative Media, feel about an esteemed paper like the Washington Post, for example, which is owned by Jeff Bezos? Do you guys see any legitimacy in that? Do you try to, you know, combat that style of journalism? Do you give credit where credit is due? I wonder how you kind of
at the center. At the center, it doesn't really enter in our scope. I'll tell you right now, billionaires are not going to be what saves local news. You know, you can squeeze. Billionaires are the problem. I mean, it is essentially like stealing your money and then asking to be thanked when you give them back $1 after you've robbed them. I mean, it is, and in a large sense, nonprofits are also a symptom of that as well. I mean, the idea that we would ever actually fix the problems that we were set out to fix would negate our usefulness, right? And so it's not like there's a conscious acknowledgement of that on a daily basis, and that, you know, oh, let's not help too much or let's not fix things or whatever. Obviously, everybody working at these organizations, and that goes for the people at the Washington Post as well, they don't sit around and think, what will Daddy Bezos, want me to write about today? But it is very true that the ownership of an organization, that the location of it, it has an influence. The business model is journalism's first editor. Chomsky writes all about this in Manufacturing Consent. You can go look, at the different phases of the propaganda model. Chomsky and Herman are brilliant on this, and it still holds true even in the digital era. Oligarchs owning our media is going to naturally and diffusely result in less critical coverage of said oligarchs in most cases. You're going to have your one-offs, you're going to have your investigations, and the same thing goes for public funding as well. The difference is there's no democratic accountability when a billionaire owns a media organization. You can't vote out Jeff Bezos unless you're on the board, and in order to be on the board, you have to be a board member of Amazon, or I don't know. I'm sure he has his own board for just his daily life. But the point is, there's no democratic oversight of something like that. And so while both models, if you will, the billionaire, trickle down funding model, and the public funding model, which is also seen as skeptical because it's government money, they're going to influence you. Of course, there's influence there. That's not to say that NPR employees and BBC employees don't do stellar, groundbreaking, and adversarial investigative work and highlight real issues within the very systems that they operate. But the idea that billionaires are a good thing in any way, it's obviously a bad thing. It's just the only thing that they are that works for them at this moment. The Washington Post is a massive international organization that needs unrealistic amounts of funding to operate, and they still pay their reporters mostly like shit. So there's hoarding even within that. I mean, the idea of a unaccountable private entity in charge of what should be a public good is, of course, problematic and deserves to be scrutinized and to be, not just scrutinized, but solutions to be proffered. And those can range from everything from worker ownership to exit to community style strategies where entrepreneurs are encouraged and legally incentivized not to build their company, infinite growth at the expense of everything else, or as quickly as you can sell it to a hedge fund, but incentivized financially and legally to sell it to the workers, sell it to the people who run the news organization. There are solutions that are varying levels of probability of success, but the idea that one person can simultaneously be shooting himself into space and owning one of the world's most prominent newspapers, and then like half of the CIA's servers that they run their information servers on. It's problematic, but the Center for Cooperative Media is just like so much more narrow in terms of what we're going to be addressing, that I get to fire off a tweet or a shit post every once in a while, but it doesn't represent the views of the center. And there's nothing the center could do about it anyway, because we can't advocate legally. We can't be an advocacy organization because we're based at a public university. So I hope that's a.
Yeah, I was curious because I think that there's tremendous value, like you said, in kind of returning reporting to the local entities. And then I think about, what is commonly given to us as news, and it seems to be exactly the opposite. So that's kind of why I was approaching that question as, I don't know if there's an adversarial relationship between the work that you do and the work that exists in that sphere, but I think you answered that tremendously.
Yeah, I'm not going to go to bat for the Washington Post or the New York Times, but I know people who work at the New York Times. I've met people who work at the Washington Post, but they're not evil people or anything. They work within a machine, and that's the best machine around, I guess, for them. God bless them. But yeah, I'm not going to turn people away, individuals away, if they need help because they work for the bad guy or whatever, But I mean, that depends. I'm not over here trying to help and support, VDARE and Stormfront or Breitbart or anything like that. But it's not really within the scope of my work. They don't come to us, right? They don't come to us and ask us how to do their thing. So I don't usually.
That's fair. I think that like you mentioned, sort of journalism, it's so sticky, it's so tricky because, like you said, government funding, there's going to be a lot of people that are turned off by that, and not to discredit the work of NPR or BBC, but there's a taint that comes with it, and it's going to be the same thing with Murdoch at Fox News and Bezos at the Washington Post, where it's like, okay, so you're not going to be critical of your boss or whomever your boss wants you to not be critical of, right? So that's gonna play a role, and it's sort of giving freelance journalism seems to be the best step forward that is on the rise today. So what's your thought on places like the Medium or all of the places that freelance journalists can now put out their stuff? Do you think that is another way for media to grow in a different way? Or Substack? That's the
Substack. Yeah, Medium, Substack, Patreon. All these platforms that allow people to raise money directly from members or subscribers and everything. That's obviously a good thing. It's democratizing the ability to generate and retain revenue and receive income from sources that are of individuals, from individuals. They're grassroots, if you will. They're not, coming from. I mean, it is coming from advertisers in some cases as well. It's basically just like the same. It's basically the same kind of thing that happened when everyone was able to start their own news site. It's just further atomized, and the infrastructure for business transactions is simplified, and it is manageable to the individual to a certain extent. Now, you can read all about the burnout for these creators. Especially the ones that are doing it by themselves. Even the ones with small teams are run ragged. It is, very different story. It's not simply once you get on Patreon or once you get on Substack, then all of a sudden your worries are over. The organization that you mentioned at the beginning, the WTF just happened today, is just myself and Matt Keyser. I do all the editing and production and narration for the audio version of it, and he does the news summaries and sends it to me, and I got to turn them around. It's a grind, and it's because it's just two of us. It's difficult, but because of platforms like Patreon and other crowdfunding opportunities or subscription-based models and platforms, that we don't need necessarily like an accounting department or an accounts received kind of a department. It's not without its downfalls, and it certainly is a symptom of the further atomization of the industry. I think until we see real organization among writers and editors and newsroom workers and news organizations, producers, news and information providers, I don't think we're going to see real substantive change in terms of the well-being and the state of the industry at the individual level. Because ultimately, this should not be an individual endeavor. It is a community effort, and it should be treated as such, both in the community of journalists, editors, publishers, and whatnot, but also among regular community members of the broader community. So it's tough because you can make it if you're lucky, and if you already have a brand, or if you have a following that makes it much easier. You can make it on your own. You can get lucky, but it is still a very fickle path that is, fallen by many. It's not a guaranteed success.
Yeah, I think the last comment that I want to make is an overarching one. Like you said, media is going to be fixed through community, through the community of the people working in it and the community of the people consuming it. And I think that is pretty much how anything and everything in life will ever work. Is people have to come together and realize that we're all kind of going for the same thing here. We all want to live a good life with valuable information and just working towards the same goals ultimately as a community. And so I think that everything in society is better if we work together. Obviously, we're not going to agree on everything, and we're going to have people, journalists covering one story and another and being adversary towards each other. And that's all well and good, as long as we all recognize that we're under the same goal of discovering the truth and what is actually going on in the world, and holding truth to power and those accountable. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. I'm going to let Stephen leave up his final remarks, and then we'll close up the interview.
So, like I just said, since we're a little pressed on time, kind of a big question, because of your role and specifically where the center is located. You guys are on a college campus. I kind of wanted to just get your thoughts, especially AJ and I kind of being alumni of it, on trends that you're noticing that give you hope in student journalism at the school level. Is this something that is worth, if there's a kid who's going to watch this, who's thinking about going to Montclair State, who's thinking about joining the Montclarian and being a journalism major, it sounds doom and gloom. Is it still worth doing?
Yeah, I think so. Take that with a grain of salt as well, because I have a job with health insurance. So of course I'm going to say that if you're struggling, and you're still getting paid shit wages, it's not as prosperous as it used to be, the career paths, but there's so many things that give me hope, because the kids are all right. They know what they're doing. They're coming up. The kids below us, the younger people, the people who have been struggling against forces for a long time, the older people as well, they're starting to coalesce. They're seeing each other. They're mentoring each other. They're working together. They're collaborating, and they're realizing that they are much better off together than they are on their own, and that the game isn't over. And until it is, you got to keep going anyway. You don't really have a choice. If you are passionate about doing something like this, if you are passionate about journalism, if you're passionate about telling stories, if you're passionate about building community, and serving and providing information needs that people need. I mean, the last 2.5 years have shown us just how important information is. We all remember what it was like in March, April 2020, when we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know what was happening. Same thing can be said during Sandy. There will be many more Sandys. There will be many more times of uncertainty and miscommunication ahead. And if that's what you're good at, if that's your calling, and if you think that you can do this, if that's something that you feel called to do, then you really don't have any other choice. So stop waffling and just do it. You're going to be fine. The teachers are working with you. The teachers the professors are. It's often easy to imagine professors as removed and academia as removed from society or the rest of the world, but these people are living in it every day, just like you and I, and they feel what's going on, and they're responding to it, and they're altering their curriculum. They're trying to serve the needs of the students as they're coming up, and they are trying to keep the administration off your backs while you report. Some better than others, of course. There are some garbage professors out there, and I've had a few of them. But the ones that are not garbage, the ones that are the opposite, will not stop working for you. And if you give them the chance, and if you commit yourself and you open yourself to it, and you go towards what makes you uncomfortable, then you're going to be just fine.
I think that is such an awesome message, Joe. And this is the reason I could listen to you talk for hours, because at the end of the day, you could say things that might really just get my blood boiling because I disagree with it so much. But you're so damn good at talking, man. I can't express it enough.
Well, thank you.
But with that, Joe, I want to give you a chance. I'll let Stephen say whatever he says, and then we'll wrap up. Actually,
as I say, he's good at talking, and any student, and I will put my own word behind this because I'm a product of this. Any student who has the opportunity to spend a lick of time with you is tremendously lucky, because that is not something, in my opinion and in my experiences, that you're going to hear put that way in the classroom. And I think that's why it's so important that you have the platform that you do, that we have this platform to share those opinions and those perspectives, because myself and Whitney Houston would agree, the children are the future. And to hear that, and with healthy skepticism in there also, is a real life look at what this profession is, the importance of it, and everything that goes into it. So I am grateful, and I think any student or person, anybody who comes across you and cares an ounce about this will also share in that gratitude. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Come on down.
So I just want to give you the opportunity to tell people where they can find you, reach out to you, contact you if they have any questions, concerns, just want to follow your work. And then I'm going to leave it after that to Stephen for our final question, which I'm sure you've heard a time or two on the radio, but it's still going to be a tough one. It's going to be a tough one, I'm sure. So where can people find you, Joe?
So you can go to centerforcooperativemedia.org. You can follow me on Twitter at JS Amditis. That's AMDITIS. And you can send me an email at amditisj@montclair.edu. And I hope it doesn't go to spam.
All right, Joe. So this is a Jersey show, Jersey boys.
Oh, God. If you ask me about Taylor Hammer pork roll right now.
No.
Okay, all right.
So we can't ask, can't ask a question with an objective answer. Pork roll.
Okay.
Go ahead. So you got a 12-hour road trip coming up. You're gonna be driving to Chicago, right? You're getting in the car. You got the iPhone up or the Android, whatever you're using.
I got the Android. Yeah, I got the Android. Look at my glasses. I got the Android.
Yes, no, I should have known. You need some good tunes. Are you putting on Bruce Springsteen or Bon Jovi?
Oh, God, fuck both of them, honestly. I tried. I want to like Bruce Springsteen so hard. I really do. Like, I want to like Bruce Springsteen. I just don't give a shit about Bruce Springsteen. Bon Jovi is also like a huge tool, honestly. And I just, honestly, I right now I put on the Brandon Sanderson book, audiobook. That's what I'm going to be doing. I've been deathly buried by the Stormlight archive right now. So that's where I'm at. But yeah, I love New Jersey so much, but I'm sorry. Yeah, Census Fail. That's New Jersey. I'll put on some Census Fail.
Okay, there we go. As long as we got something, right?
There we go. Yeah.
All right. Joe, thank you so much for everything. We really appreciate you coming on. And without leaving this any longer, because like we said, we can talk to Joe all day. I'm AJ Malillo.
I am Stephen Rombolo.
And thanks for joining us for another episode of Bridging the Gap. And we hope to see you next week. See you, everybody.